All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle a really fundamental question for anyone who invests. How in the world do you figure out the expected return for your entire portfolio, not just one stock? Let's get into it.
So you've done all the hard work, you've done your research, you've picked your stocks, your money's in the market, but what now? What's the big picture look like? What kind of return can you actually expect from this specific mix of investments? You can think of your portfolio kind of like a recipe. The final taste doesn't depend on just one ingredient. It depends on how much of each ingredient you've decided to mix in.
Now, you might be thinking this involves some crazy, high-level, complicated math. But honestly, it doesn't. The core idea behind it is surprisingly simple, and we're about to unlock the exact formula that the pros use for their portfolio analysis.
Okay, and here it is. I know, it might look a little intimidating with all those symbols, but I promise you, by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly what every single piece means and, more importantly, how to use it. We're just going to break it down step by step.
First up is WIT, or the weight. This is just the slice of the pie. Seriously, that's it. It's the percentage of your total investment money that you've put into one specific stock. So if you've got $1,000 invested and 500 of it is in one company, its weight is 50%. See? Simple.
Next, you've got this ERI part. This is the expected return for just one of your stocks. Now, this isn't some magic number that's guaranteed to happen. It's more of an educated guess. It's the return you think that one stock will give you, and it's usually based on how it's done in the past or what the financial analysts are predicting for its future.
So here's the main takeaway. That whole formula, it's really just a fancy way of saying this. To get your total portfolio return, you figure out each stock's individual contribution, and then you just add them all together. And how do you find that contribution? You just multiply its weight by its expected return. That's the whole logic right there. Okay, theory is great, but where do you actually find these numbers out in the real world? Let's talk about the practical side of this, where you actually source the data.
So for that expected return of a single stock, the pros usually pull from a few key places. They might look at the stock's historical average performance, or they might use projections from Wall Street analysts, or sometimes they'll use these complex financial models. The goal is always the same: find a realistic estimate.
In visualizing the weights? Super easy. In this example portfolio, let's say 70% of the money is in stock A and the other 30% is in stock B. These are our WI values that we're going to plug into the formula.
And this brings us to the one golden rule of portfolio weights: they absolutely must add up to 100%. It makes sense, right? You're accounting for all of your invested money. So whether you have 2 stocks or 20 stocks, the sum of all their individual weights has to equal the whole thing.
All right, that's enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and actually walk through a real example. We're going to take some numbers and see this formula in action, step by step, so you can see exactly how it works.
So here's our setup. We have a simple portfolio, just 2 stocks. Stock A makes up 70% of our portfolio, and we're expecting it to return about 10%. Stock B is the other 30%, and we think it'll return around 6%. We've got all the pieces we need.
Okay, let's do the math. First, we find stock A's contribution. We take its weight, 70% or 0.70, and multiply it by its expected return of 10%. That gives us 7%. Then we do the exact same thing for stock B. Its weight, 30%, times its 6% return, that gives us 1.8%. The final step, you guessed it. Just add those two numbers together. And there you have it, 8.8%. That is the total expected return for our entire portfolio. See how this works? It's not just a simple average of the two returns. It's a weighted average. It properly accounts for how much money, how much conviction you've put into each stock.
So now we know how to calculate expected return. That's awesome. It's a huge step. But I have to tell you, that's really only one side of the investing coin. There's another huge factor that we have to think about. And that factor is risk. As we just saw, calculating return is a pretty linear, straightforward process. You multiply, you add, you're done. Risk, on the other hand, is a whole different animal. It's much more complex, it's nonlinear, and it's not just about how risky each stock is on its own, but how they move together.
The tool that's used to measure this complex relationship is called the variance-covariance matrix. Now that sounds intense, and we're not going to dive into that today, but it's important to know it exists because it's the critical next step to building a truly optimized portfolio. But here's the really good news. You do not have to do all of these crazy risk calculations by hand on a spreadsheet anymore. So many investors now use modern tools and apps that can automate all this stuff, helping you build an efficient portfolio that's actually tailored to how much risk you're comfortable with.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. Knowing your expected return is an incredibly powerful first step, but the true art of investing, well, that lies in the balance. So now that you understand the return side of the equation, the real question is, how will you manage the risk?